Your FI number, at its very base, is 25 times your annual expenses. But does your FI number change over time? What considerations should you put into your FI number, and how frequently should you revisit it? That's what we're going to talk about today. Hello, and welcome to the BiggerPockets Money podcast. My name is Mindy Jensen, and with me as always is my calculating co-host, Scott Trench.
Thanks, Mindy. Great to be here with someone who excels at personal finance the way you do. Today, Mindy and I are going to be talking about calculating your FI number. Yes, it's 25 times your annual expenses, or if you're Frank Vasquez, you might argue it's 20 times your annual expenses. But there are a lot of nuances to that number. And what compiles your FI number? What are the expenses you need to plan for? There's a lot of depth to this discussion, and I'm excited to get into it with you today, Mindy. We have all heard of the shockingly simple math to early retirement, which is a blog post written by Mr. Money Mustache some 10, 12 years ago now. Go check it out if you haven't read it yet. We've discussed it multiple times here on the show. But the savings rate that you have and the amount you're going to spend after retirement may be different numbers. There may be different ways to massage or tweak that number, and we're going to get into all of that nuance here today on BiggerPockets Money. I think one of the best places to start on this is to talk from personal experience. Mindy, when did you decide on your FI number, and what were your life circumstances like at that point in time?
Scott, this was back in 2012 or 2013 when we first discovered the concept of financial independence and that you could retire early. We did the math per the 4% rule and our spend rate at the time, and we came up with $1 million or $1,120,000 because we wanted to have enough money to pay off our mortgage, but we didn't want to pay off our mortgage. My life circumstances at the time, I was a stay-at-home mom with 2 young kids. In 2012, I had a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old.
Awesome. And what you said 1.12 million, and you talked about the paying off the home mortgage. Did you include your home equity in that calculation, or were you excluding it with that statement?
The 1 million was our investment accounts, our 401k, Roth IRA, and after-tax brokerage accounts. And at the time that we discovered it, we were, I think this is on Carl's blog, at 586,000. So we had been saving. We were very good savers and investors already, and we just discovered what we were saving towards, which was financial independence.
And then how long did it take you to achieve that number once you set out with that as the goal?
It was supposed to be done in 1,500 days, hence the name of the blog, but we actually achieved it. It's been so long, I can't even remember when we got to our original number, but I'm going over to the blog 3 years later, 2013, 2014, 2015, and January 1st, 2016, we hit $1,057,000. If you look back at the stock market, then it was just like hockey stick growth.
That's true. Yeah, both of us enjoyed really good runs in the stock market and in real estate during our journeys to financial independence, which hopefully continue for lots of other folks. Mindy, did that number, that $1 million target, your net worth is much greater now. Did that target change, or did you just continue to want to live at that same level of expectations, even as your wealth far surpassed that number?
We continued working. Carl continued working through 2016 and then one more year, so through 2017, and he finally retired. Our numbers stayed the same. We were aiming for $1 million, and we didn't change that number. I don't think we've ever actually changed that number, although our spending is not in alignment with a $1 million portfolio, which would be approximately $40,000 a year. We've moved up in our spending to about $60,000 or $80,000 a year, depending on, the year. We don't really have a budget. We're still really conscious of where our money's going, but we're not as tight as we used to be. I think that if we were honest with ourselves, our new FI number would be 2.5 to 2.5 million. How about you, Scott? When did you calculate your FI number for the first time, and what was it?
My FI number, I think like a lot of other people at that time, around this 2013, 2014, started out as a goal of $1 million. And that net worth threshold was likely, I say likely because it's a little hard to peg the current value of real estate holdings and or the holdings in BiggerPockets, which were my biggest investments, if you will, at that point in time. Those were likely crossed around the 2016, 2017 mark, generally speaking, because of the massive appreciation in real estate and my becoming the CEO and president here at BiggerPockets. And it's kind of interesting in thinking about what, my circumstance at that point in time was I was a single guy, just meeting my wife right around that same point where I achieved financial independence or that initial goal. And my needs were very low at, $30,000, $40,000 a year. It felt like a huge abundance, especially with no real massive outlay on housing. And that definitely would not be the target with a family and two little girls. I would definitely want to spend much more, potentially much more, somewhere in that $8,000 to $10,000 a month range would likely be the goal. My financial portfolio allows me to spend even more than that, including full-time daycare, for example, for two little girls. So that's been the goalposts have absolutely shifted for me personally over the years.
Let's see, how do I want to say this? Did your goalposts change as you spent more, or did you consciously think about, oh, you know what? 1 million isn't enough. Now I'm going to aim for 2 million. Or did your goals, like I didn't aim for 2 million. Our investments just kept growing. So we started spending a little bit more, but I don't think we ever actually changed our number. Did you ever actually consciously change your number?
Did I change my number? No. But a couple of things happened in my situation. First, same as you, the portfolio growth allowed for much more spending. So it was kind of like, why would I artificially keep my spending very low when I can easily spend much more? And there is benefit to spending much more money. Of course, bring better quality of life in many areas. So that was one component of it. And the other was the nature of the CEO job at BiggerPockets, which was so consuming, offered high compensation. And it was like, well, if I'm doing this thing, then I'm either not spending time with my family or not doing the right thing for a company that employs 80 people and has shareholders and many listeners and followers and viewers. And so things like mowing the lawn or cleaning the house, those were things I outsourced at that point in time. I'm now insourcing those because there's not, now that I'm not doing the big job at BiggerPockets, it doesn't make sense to hire those things out the same way. But that was kind of an interesting mindset shift in terms of how to think about my spending and my FIRE number in the context of these changes with expenses that were clearly there because they were the right thing for that point in my life, but were not for a more frugal FIRE portfolio.
I have another question about your FI number. Because you have a significant real estate portfolio, how did your FI number change once you started getting all of this real estate cash flow? Did you think about, I still need 1 million for the 40,000 a year? Or did you think my real estate is kicking off X dollars, so now I need less in my stock market investments?
The latter. And this is something I've been struggling with all year, right? I love the research we talk about with the 4% rule. We've talked to Bill Bengen. We've talked to Frank Vasquez. We've talked to Michael Kitces, many of the people who pioneer research in the withdrawal stage of a portfolio. And I just know that personally, I'm not the kind of guy who at 34, 35, I'll be 35 soon, can actually sell off my stocks and live off of that to fund consumption. And so, as a real estate investor with significant experience, I felt that I can better achieve my goals by thinking about my spending in terms of the income that my assets generate and staying within those limits. And that's the goal, is I will always stay within those limits. I may earn more money, like doing BiggerPockets Money, a job that I absolutely love, and other things in the future, but I will spend as if my portfolio is the only component of that. And that may cost me some opportunity cost, but as the portfolio grows, maybe I will reintroduce cleaning services and those types of things. It's just hard when I want to do work like this. My wife wants to write, and the childcare at this season in our life is very expensive. So we can't have the childcare and have the house cleaned and. There has to be some cutoffs and limits in place. And so we prioritize what's most important to us in that spending, and doing the lawn once a week is a small price to pay.
Scott, you're turning into a true dad. Do you have New Balance sneakers too?
Oh my gosh, I got 7 copies of this Costco shirt. I got the mustache, the wood-fired pellet grill, and then the I don't have New Balance sneakers. I have running shoes.
Not quite full on dad then, Scott. You need a pair of white New Balance tennis shoes if you want to be a true dad. But you're getting there. You're getting real close. Fanny pack?
No, I don't have a fanny pack, and I'm not a mammal yet.
What's a mammal?
Oh, Google it. It's safe for work, but barely.
Okay. Okay, so Scott, somebody listening to this episode wanting to get a more accurate FI number for themselves with real estate as part of their portfolio, how are they treating the real estate? Because we're talking cash flow. I think real estate investors who want to be real estate investors are there for the long-term cash flow more than the appreciation. I'm not really talking about flippers because that's kind of short-term gains. That's income, which should be invested in a different way or could be invested in a different way that would provide long-term cash flow. But for the rental real estate investors who have, let's say, 50% of their expenses, their current expenses are coming from the cash flow. How are they to think about this when they're determining their FI number?
I think you just think about it exactly like that, right? If your desired spending target is $80,000 a year and $40,000 is a conservative approximation of the cash flow net of vacancy, capex, those types of things from, for example, a paid off rental or two, then the rest of your FIRE portfolio would need to be about $1 million to generate the remaining $40,000 you could spend. So I think it's as simple as that in the context of a real estate investment. A business might be thought of differently, right? Because the business income could be much less predictable, for example, than real estate income over a long period of time. Businesses can grow dramatically and shrink dramatically. So I think I would be reluctant to count business asset in my net worth statement, unless it was very conservatively stated or about to be sold in the imminent future. Mindy, I think the first thing that we should talk about if we're talking about this concept of your calculating your FIRE number is what is a FIRE number and how does it differ from a net worth statement?
Scott, I think this is a really great question and something that the FI community hasn't really done a great job of separating out. I think for a lot of people, net worth and FI number are the same thing for a long time. If you're just starting out on your financial independence journey and your net worth is $20,000, it's easy for you to think of, I've got a long way to go to get to my FI number. But your net worth includes all of your assets, including your home's equity, your car values, your collectibles, all of the everything that isn't really going to generate cash flow and liquid investments that you can sell to fund your lifestyle in your FI number. Some people will say, well, I have $1 million in net worth, but it's all tied up in my home equity and my 401k and I can't access it. And money tied up in your net worth is not to be included in your FI numbers. I think I made a misspeaking a couple of minutes ago and said net worth and FI number as I intertwined them. I think it gets confused a lot in this community, but we definitely need to be talking about financial independence number, the amount of money that you are saving so that you can then start withdrawing from it at 5% per Frank Vasquez or 4% per Bill Bengen or 3%, 3.25% per Big Earn.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for most people, it boils down to the very simple concept. Don't include your home equity in your FIRE number unless you intend to use your home as part of that FIRE number. So if you are living in a home that you expect to live in for the next 20 years, like me, you should exclude your home from your FIRE number. It's part of my net worth statement. I know that my home's value and I track that. If you said, what's my net worth? I would say it's my financial portfolio plus my home equity. I also include my cars, for example, my net worth statement, but I would not include my home or cars or personal property of any kind that was not intended to be sold anytime in the near future as part of my FIRE number. The FIRE number is the investment portfolio that is intended to distribute wealth that I can actually retire on. And that would include all of my investable assets. And I would include things that are illiquid in there too. A business that is conservatively valued or likely to be sold, even if it's an illiquid, can count in that FIRE portfolio number, just as a rental property can, even though they're less liquid. You may want to think about them differently and how they're going to impact your ability to spend in early retirement a little differently than you would a traditional 60/40 stock bond portfolio. But they're there. They're a part of the FIRE portfolio. They're intended to be used to generate liquidity or cash flow that you'll spend.
Scott, I would push back on that just a little bit and say that if your rental portfolio, the cash flow from your rental portfolio, you're planning on that funding part of your lifestyle in retirement, then I would almost count that as your net worth, but like the portfolio is your net worth, but not your FIRE number. The cash flow affects your FIRE number. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So my rental portfolio, right? I'm only spending the cash flow that's generated by the rental portfolio. I'm not spending the principal in those properties. And I don't know any real estate investors, or hardly any real estate investors, who use that as a primary mechanism. Maybe you refinance one when your kid goes to college, and that's how you pay for college tuition. But it's a rare person who's selling off rental properties, I believe, to fund consumption on a regular basis. But I think you got to include the rental equity in the FIRE number and the FIRE portfolio number when you're thinking about what is my FIRE portfolio, right? If you got $1 million in rental real estate that is part of that $2.5 million FIRE target, the rest is that 60/40 stock bond portfolio, I think that's a $2.5 million FIRE portfolio. I would argue it is, even though we're going to have to think about the distributions from the 1.5 million stock bond piece using the 4% rule, and we're going to have to think about the income that the $1 million rental portion generates. What do you think?
I think we're saying the same thing, but in slightly different ways. I would say that if you have a $1 million rental portfolio that kicks off $10,000 a month, then you can count that $1 million rental portfolio as $120,000 a year. I would also like that rental portfolio very much.
I would say if that's your conservative approximation of spending, you're going to be just fine. Obviously, the big gotcha for a lot of real estate investors is those projections don't always map out. So it's a conservative interpretation of that cash flow. But my spending is governed by the cash flow generated by my portfolio, rental and stock bonds. And that's how I govern my spending personally today. That may change in the future if I begin to decumulate in some way, but that's how I govern it today.
So Scott, you mentioned that your FIRE number has changed because your life circumstances have changed. And my FIRE number changed because my portfolio far exceeded my expectations. What are some of the things that changed in your life that caused your FIRE number to change? And did your FIRE number change based on those or based on future projections? Like, when are you looking to define your FIRE number? Right now, you've got childcare, but you're not going to have childcare in 10 years. So are you looking at your number now, or are you looking at your number in 10 years?
That's the fun of this game, is everyone says nail down your spending. This is a much easier game, I believe, for someone who's approaching traditional retirement and has their spending for them and their spouse locked down, and the kids are out of the house, and the question is how much to give or not at that component of time. I think it's much more challenging for someone with young children to project these, because absolutely there's childcare expenses, which right now are very high. When my children are school age, my expenses they'll still be high. I have no illusions that children are that can be very expensive, and that the most expensive years could be college, for example. I have assets set aside for college expenses that will be ready to go at that point in time. I think that my expenses will go down over the next several years, or at least I'll be able to shift, or alternatively, I'll be able to shift spending away from childcare towards other items like maybe more travel. Travel is a much lower bucket of spending because we don't have the desire to travel quite as much with two young children that we might if we did not have those two young children.
I heard somebody say, and I thought this was so brilliant, they're like, traveling with two young children isn't vacation. It's just parenting in a different place.
That is 100% correct. And my 2-year-old, I'm sure she would love the beaches of Maui. She also loves the fountains at the local park. And one does not involve a long plane ride. No matter how luxury you can spend on the plane ride, it's still a long plane ride to get out there.
With a 2-year-old.
When they're 5, 7, 10, I think that will be different. And then I think travel expenses will be much greater. But I also won't have daycare for 2 kiddos to pay for. So I think those things just change as life evolves. And I think that more important than what that spending, trying to project that in great minute detail, it's what's a reasonably high ceiling for this spending. As long as I have the controls in place to stay inside that ceiling of spending, I maintain my position of financial independence. If I go beyond those, then I have that problem. So today I might mow my grass and hire out the cleaning of the house less frequently. And in 3 years, those may change dramatically.
What is a reasonable ceiling of spending? I don't think people are thinking about that. I think people are trying to keep themselves locked down into the smallest amount that they could possibly spend.
I think the ceiling concept comes down to having the controls in place to spend appropriately in a budget. I think there's a lot of people out there that will benefit from the exercise of saying, the amount I can safely spend is this, and I must stay within it. And everybody needs to do this, from people who are broke and just starting to build that first $100 or $1,000 in savings to multimillionaires or even billionaires. They just call it cash flow management when you get into that super rich category, I believe, or so I'm told. But I think this concept of budgeting and spending controls is absolutely essential at every part in that journey, even if it's just like what I'm doing, saying, here's the ceiling, we're very happy with it and it provides a really good lifestyle, but we must stay within those boundaries. And that's the act of budgeting, accounting if you're in business. Nobody likes to do this. It's not fun to set limits and controls and project these expenses and track them. You must do them, I believe, if you want to confidently fire and confidently calculate your fire number.
Do you check in on your spending monthly or weekly or just annually?
I check in on my spending monthly at the very least, and I'll kind of reapproach it in the middle of it. But I've found that act of checking my spending on a monthly basis has been helpful, but not actually putting the pin in. I'm actually staying within the bounds I want to set for myself. So I'm actually exploring a different tool, which I think we'll talk about in a few weeks, that will actually physically force me to stay within those limits. Like you said, you're going to spend $2,000 on groceries, or groceries and food and restaurants, and you are now over that limit. Well, better wait till next month on this, starting out of the pantry. We won't go that far with it, but that's the concept that I want to play with, and actually putting those limits in that force me to stay within the boundaries that I want to set.
Okay, so we're in different parts of our life. I am in the embracing more spending because my FI number has been met and we're good financially. We have more than we thought we were going to spend, and we will be good. So I'm not super conscious of how much we're spending, but we do keep a loose track of it. In the past, I have been much more conscious about how much I'm spending, in which bucket I'm spending. But now I've got a girl going off to college. We are taking her to college in the middle of August, and she's going to be living on her own. She's going to need to learn how to navigate spending money. And I am using that same tool to help her learn how to spend, learn how to budget, learn how to keep track of her expenses so that she's not going over her budget, because it's much easier for me to be like, well, I budgeted $6,000 for this month, but something fun came up and I'm now going to spend $8,000. That's okay, because I'm well within my means to do so. But when you're first starting out, I think it's so important to be able to see in real time where your money is supposed to be going and where it's actually going.
I think that there's a fundamental problem that a lot of people face in this community of, I'm tracking my spending, but am I controlling it, to your point? And I think that that's going to be the big challenge. You don't want a college student, for example, as responsible as I know your girls are, to have unlimited access to something. There should be, hey, we're going to provide for this, but you blow it this month, go figure it out. You're an adult now, until next month's. I think that comes back to calculating your fire number, right? Is there a limit? I think a lot of people are scared or fearful or not pulling the trigger as soon as they could because they don't have these basic controls in place. I'm in that category as well, because I didn't do this for the last year or so while I was CEO of BiggerPockets. I'm doing it now because my circumstances have changed. I've got a great situation. It's just, I need to make sure I have those controls in place.
Yeah. And I think that's really important. Make sure you have those controls in place. Just because Carl and I are not tracking every single penny to the penny doesn't mean we're not keeping an eye on it. We're still conscious of loosely how much of our money we can be spending. And when we feel like we are spending too much, we pull back. This year, we started off going on vacation like every weekend, the first quarter of this year. And not only is that really exhausting when you're trying to keep up with school for your kids, but it's also just exhausting to be going someplace every single week. And, my bank account was like, hey, give us a little bit of a break too. Now, Scott, do you give yourself any buffer?
Yeah, absolutely. The buffer is actually for us like $2,500 in that for what's going to come up. Is there something going to break around the house? Is the car going to need new tires? Is there going to be, who knows what exactly that's going to be? But on top of the things that we can't project, we put in place a pretty hefty buffer for life's requirements that come up in any given month.
Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that.
So do you?
We don't have a buffer, but we have a general idea of how much we want to spend. Over the course of the year, we're going to spend, let's say it's $100,000 this year. So that's what, $8,000 a month? Oh, okay. In January, we went over. In February, we went over. In March, we went over. But in April, we were way under. It's just kind of a keeping track loosely where we are at.
How would you think about, I talked about this ceiling concept, but let's say that we're in a different situation. Let's say that we know that there's one expense left. Let's say it's college as an easy example, right? There's just college, and that's going to cost X amount over the next couple of years. We're not quite sure because our kiddo hasn't determined whether they want to go to the expensive private school or the much cheaper state school. And we haven't figured out if we're going to get any scholarship or other items that can come in to change that. How do we think about our FIRE number in that context?
Wow. Okay. So this is kind of the exact situation that we found ourselves in last year. Our daughter wasn't sure which school she wanted to go to, the state school or the more expensive out-of-state school. She actually ended up going to the less expensive out-of-state school. So it's cheaper for her to go out of state than it is to go in-state Colorado. We did not qualify for any loans or any grants or anything like that. Well, loans, but they were unsubsidized. We are ending up just footing the bill for it. We have the means to do so. I think that if you are not financially independent and your child comes to you and says, hey, I want to go to this school, you should have a dollar amount that you are willing to pay. If you're willing to pay, I mean, zero is a dollar amount that you're willing to pay. We told our daughter, we will pay up to $30,000 a year for your school. If you go to a school that costs $80,000 a year, you are on the hook for $50,000 a year. That's $200,000 for a 4-year degree, which in the field that she's choosing is not going to get her anything. She will have to go to additional school. So she will already come out of school with $200,000 in debt. That was really eye-opening to her to say, okay, well, then I'm not going to go to that school. In terms of your FI number, I don't think it should count towards your FI number either way. It's an expense, and it's a fairly short-term expense in the whole grand scheme of things, just like childcare. You can determine that this is going to be something that I will plan for and save for this X expense, rather than thinking about it as I have to have this as part of my retirement accounts.
I think that's a great answer, right? It's what's the number, the maximum that you would be willing to go to? And that is the answer, that you put that in and that you subtract that from your portfolio, basically, or the amount you're going to need to accumulate for the next couple of years and add that in. I think it's a very simple and powerful answer for how to fund college. And if that's $80,000 a year, 2 kids, well, then you're going to put in, what is that? $640,000. And you're going to offset your FIRE number because you can't plan otherwise. You have to assume that that could happen. I love that setting of the limit tool that you used there. I think that's a very, very powerful approach. Let's do another one here. Let's do a mortgage on the home. So I've got a $300,000 mortgage. What's a typical mortgage payment on a home that has $300,000 left at like 3.5%? One of those old mortgages from 5 years ago.
$1,300 or $1,500. That's what mine is.
Perfect. Okay, so we have $1,500. That's $18,000 per year, right? 1,500 times 12. And the FIRE number that would need to back into would be 15 times 25, $375,000. So how do I think about some of those odd situations to feel comfortable spending at the 4% rule and pay my mortgage, which is a fixed unrelenting obligation for 25 years? How do you think about that in calculating a FIRE number?
I did not calculate my next FIRE number with the current mortgage that I have. At the time that we were calculating our FIRE number at 1 million, we bumped it back to 1,120,000, which was what we had left on our mortgage at the time. So by that mentality, I would have my current FIRE number be 2,300,000. Then I've got the 2 million that I can live off of, and I've got the 300,000 that I can choose to pay off my mortgage. I can make payments because it's such a low interest rate, and it had been the last time too. I don't think about that as I need, $350,000 because at any time I could just pay off my mortgage.
This is weird mortgage math. I don't think it's necessarily the right move or not to pay off a mortgage or not in one of these old situations. It's a personal choice item for folks that are at this point in their wealth journey and on the verge of FIRE. But yeah, I think that's a very reasonable way to think about it. If it's in your FIRE portfolio and you have a truly diversified, not just 100% stock portfolio, but something that does include bonds or alternatives or those types of things, then yeah, you could just assume that that's all part of your FIRE portfolio and you're gonna be able to cover the expenses that you need to pay for, which include your home mortgage payment, your $1,500 there. So as long as the cash flow from the distributions from your portfolio at 4% or after cash flow covers that mortgage payment, you're still FIRE. But it can be easier in a lot of cases because of the weird math of FIRE to just pay off that mortgage, even if it is lower interest.
Yep. That's a conscious decision that Carl and I decided not to pay off the mortgage.
Awesome. Let me ask you one more kind of tricky one here in the FIRE number calculation. I talked to somebody recently who was giving a significant amount of money every month to adult children, which is not uncommon. By the way, it's not talked about a lot, but it's not uncommon, especially for folks who have adult children and are tuning in to shows like BiggerPockets Money with a net worth into the millions. How do we think about those types of gifts in the context of a FIRE number expense? Are they just taken out every month or are they more flexible, do you think?
When you say gift, do you mean that I am gifting some money to my adult children because I have more than I need? Or am I giving them money to help them live?
Both.
If I was gifting, if I happen to have some extra money, I'm going to give it to my kid. That is just a random expense that I don't think needs to be calculated into your FI number because it's a whenever I feel like it money exchange. If I was actually supporting my adult children for whatever reason, I would want to add that into my FI number because if I'm supporting them now, chances are really good I will be supporting them long term. If I'm just supporting them through college, like I've got a kid that's going to be in college, that is just going to be an expense over the next 4 years.
The problem with the FIRE calculation is, again, the lower your fixed expenses, the lower the overall expenses, the ceiling that you can put in your spending and feel comfortable about spending, the easier it is to solve the FIRE equation. And so a fixed, unrelenting obligation is our enemy in the world of FIRE, right? Like that mortgage payment results in that funky math, right? Because to be sure that your FIRE portfolio is going to cover your mortgage payment, you need a lot more than what the mortgage balance is, even with those lower interest rate payments. That's our challenge here. And so when I talked over this issue with this individual, I suggested, hey, there needs to be a way to reframe this gift as an expectation that is relentless and ongoing in the perpetual future. Is there a way to think about buying out that gift? Right? I give you more upfront now, then I will give as I choose at more infrequent intervals when the market performs well, for example, over time, for example. Those are real risks to a portfolio with those fixed obligations. So I would just encourage folks that have something like that, a discretionary but not really expense that's coming out. Is there a way to buy out the fixed obligation component of it in a way that is amicable to other parties? Because that will give you a lot more flexibility in the rest of your portfolio. Those are three edge cases that I think are pretty interesting. The home mortgage payment, the I sort of have to do it, but don't really, ongoing gifts, whether that's to a family member, which I think is a very challenging conversation, or charitable giving.
Yeah. And charitable giving is, I think, a different animal. That is something that you are choosing to do of your own volition, and you are doing this as something that you want to do. So therefore, I am going to make room in my budget to do this. And to make room in your budget after retirement is to have a larger FI number. Okay, Scott, we've been talking about calculating your FI number. We've been talking about all the different things that go into your FI number. I'm not sure if you remember, it's been 100 years since we've done a Finance Friday episode, but we have a document that we send to anybody who is thinking about being on our Finance Friday episode that gives you, it's like a financial overview. It asks you questions, fill in the blank here, for different places where you might not be thinking, oh, this is actually part of my FI number. This is part of my net worth. This is how I should figure this out. So I would love to invite anybody who is thinking, I really want to figure out what is my net worth, what is my FI number, here's my expenses, et cetera, to go to our website and download this document. Our website is BiggerPocketsMoney.com, and this is the financial overview document.
Yeah, absolutely. And all this is a personal financial statement. So if you have a personal financial statement, you don't need to do this exercise. This is just a DIY, insert the numbers And we've made a free Excel spreadsheet that'll allow you to do this. The outputs will only be as good as the inputs that you put in. So you got to know your numbers and actually put them together. And we see the whole gamut here. We see folks that have everything nailed down to the T with decimal points for their spending. We see folks who round kind of crazily, way under, very rarely over on their expense categories. But the better you do at this exercise, the more confident you'll be in what you need for your FIRE number.
Awesome. Okay, Scott, I think this was a super fun conversation, but I am ready to go recalculate my FIRE number. How about you?
Me too. Let's do it.
All right, that wraps up this episode of the BiggerPockets Money podcast. He is Scott Trench. I am Mindy Jensen saying, see ya, zebra.